Have you ever wondered how ancient mothers brought life into the world without hospitals or doctors or machines? Hi guys, I am Corey AI, and I hope you loved my voice. Now let us begin a slow, calm journey into Chapter 1, where we explore the very first moments of birth in the ancient world. Chapter 1. A question beneath the stars. Long before cities were built, and long before temples rose from stone, there were women giving birth under the open sky, with only the stars to watch and the earth to hold them steady. These were not queens, or priestesses, or noble daughters, just women with strong hands and wide hips and deep breath, moving through pain in places without walls, without pillows, without silence. They gave birth near rivers, near fires, near trees, sometimes in the corner of a hut, and sometimes in the grass, with only a cloak between their skin and the dirt. The body knew what to do, because it had done it before, through generations of memory passed, not through books, but through bone and blood, and the touch of an elder's hand on the shoulder, saying, yes, this is the way. No one shouted, no one screamed. There was no panic, only rhythm and sweat, and the quiet encouragement of another woman crouched nearby, pressing water to her lips, or singing something old and low when the child came. It came not with great noise, but with a slow shifting of time. The world paused, the stars blinked, and in the arms of a woman shaking and smiling, there was something new. The first mothers did not name their children right away. They watched them, listened to them, held them close, and waited for the right word to arrive. Like a bird landing on a branch, soft and certain. And in that moment, the earth turned slightly, and the fire crackled, and the woman who had just become something new closed her eyes, not from exhaustion, but from a peace so deep it needed no words. Because birth in the ancient world was not only about survival, it was about belonging to the cycle, about stepping into a story older than any one voice, older than even memory. And the night stretched on with one more heart beating in the dark. In ancient times, a woman did not give birth in a delivery room. She gave birth in the place. She lived the place. She cooked the place. She swept each morning with her bare hands. And when the time came when her belly felt heavy and her back ached low and deep, the women around her began to prepare a space, not grand, not wide, but sacred in its own quiet way. In a small hut made of reeds or stone, a low bed was cleared and softened with wool or straw or bundled cloth in cold places. Warm stones were wrapped in fabric and tucked beneath the bedding to chase away the chill. In warmer lands, shade was created with large leaves or stretched cloths to cool the sweat on the mother's face and keep the sunlight gentle as it touched her skin. The air was changed to not by machines, but by herbs smoldering in small bowls, frankincense or sage or cedar, filling the corners with their thick, sweet smoke, believed to chase away bad spirits and clear the air for new life. Water was warmed in clay pots, not boiled, but held over soft fire until steam curled gently from the rim. This water would not just clean, but comfort. Soaking cloths used to press against the skin to bring calm between the waves of pain. Clean cloths were laid nearby, folded with care. Old blankets, sometimes passed down through many births, placed at the foot of the bed, ready to receive something sacred again. And perhaps most tender of all was the gathering of hands, not just midwives, but aunts, cousins, grandmothers, women who had given birth, and women who had not all coming quietly, moving with purpose, but not haste. There were no tools of steel, there were no sterile gloves, but there was care and presence, and the deep memory of how life begins. The space was not perfect, it was not spotless, but it was ready, and that readiness was not made from walls or windows, but from attention, from warmth, from stillness. It was a room filled with breath and time and love, waiting patiently to welcome something that had never been seen before. And as the mother lowered herself onto that small space carved out from daily life, the walls did not change, but the air did. It held something sacred, now something ancient and completely new. In the ancient world, a woman's birth garment was not chosen for appearance or fashion. It was chosen for feeling, for movement, for memory, and most of all, for trust. It was something she had touched many times before, washed many times with her own hands, something that held the shape of her back and the smell of her skin, a piece of cloth that had lived with her and would now help carry her through. In ancient Egypt, a woman might slip into a loose linen robe, white or pale, dyed with natural colors, soft from years of wear, its fibers smoothed by the desert wind and the hands of mothers before her in the highlands of ancient Peru. A mother might wrap herself in woven alpaca wool, warmed by the sun and heavy with tradition, tied gently with a red cord, believed to protect her from harm. Sometimes she wore nothing at all, not from shame, but from necessity, because movement was needed, freedom was needed, and skin needed to breathe beneath the work of birth. There were no buttons, no seams, no tight laces, only fabric that moved with her as she swayed or crouched or sat, hands gripping wood or cloth or another fingers. And once the garment was on her body, she did not think of it again. It was part of her, like breath, like heartbeat, simply present, doing what it was meant to do. In many cultures, that garment would never be worn again, not because it was dirty, but because it had done something holy. It had wrapped a woman in the oldest magic, and that kind of cloth was meant to rest or return to the earth. Some were burned in sacred fire, others were buried beneath trees, or folded into a chest and kept with tokens of the child's first days, pieces of hair or beads, or a name carved into soft wood. Because in the ancient world, clothing for birth was not an accessory, it was a companion, it was part of the ceremony. It held the weight of pain, the heat of breath, the wetness of tears, and when it was removed, when the woman was clean again and the child slept near her chest, that garment still carried the shape of something that would never be repeated. It was never just fabric, it was memory, it was shelter, it was strength. The quiet corners of ancient villages and along dusty roads in desert lands, there lived women who carried a special kind of knowing. They were not called doctors or nurses. They were called midwives, and their knowledge came not from scrolls or temples, but from years of watching, years of listening, and years of holding life as it entered the world. She was often an older woman, not because youth lacked strength, but because time had given her eyes that did not flinch. The midwife did not command, she did not shout, she watched and she waited. She hummed a low tune or pressed a damp cloth to the mother's brow or whispered soft reminders about breathing, about relaxing, about trusting the body. She was the one who knew when to press gently on the belly, when to hold the hips, when to catch the baby with both hands, as it slipped into the world, slippery, warm, and trembling. In some places, she would sing a special song passed down through generations, believed to call the soul gently into the body. In other places, she would anoint the newborn with sacred oil or wrap it in a cloth she had prepared long before the labor began. When the birth was done and the baby cried or slept against the mother's chest, the midwife cleaned the space, folded the cloths, placed the herbs into a bowl to burn, and let the room rest in quiet peace. She did not ask for thanks. She did not stay for celebration. She slipped out like smoke in the morning, her work done, her role complete, until the next birth called her back. The midwife was not magic, but she carried something close to it, the kind of magic that comes from steady care, from deep memory, from years of watching life begin over and over again. In the ancient world, birth was not only a physical act, it was a crossing, a transformation, a moment when something invisible became visible, when breath found form and spirit found skin. It was not explained with charts or diagrams. It was felt deeply and understood through symbols, rituals, and whispered truths passed down from old to young. Like soft thread weaving through time in the temples of Egypt, birth was tied to the goddess Hathor, protector of women and motherhood, her face carved into ivory and stone. Watched over birthing rooms with gentle eyes as women prayed or chanted beneath her gaze in ancient India. The act of birth was considered the entry of the soul into earthly form, not a beginning, but a return, a continuation of a long unseen journey guided by karma and divine will. Among the Norse, in cold wooden homes, warmed by fire and breath, women called upon Freya, the goddess of fertility and strength. They spoke her name in silence or carved it into birthing stools, believing her presence could ease the pain and protect the child. In many African traditions, birth was seen as a door opening between the worlds. The mother, a vessel; the child, a traveler; the space itself filled with unseen energies that had to be welcomed and honored. It was common to place special stones near the laboring mother's smooth black river rocks or crystals believed to hold the memory of the earth and steady the body as the soul entered it. Water to held meaning, not just for cleaning, but for purification. Many women were washed before and after birth in sacred rivers or in basins blessed by elders to wash away fear and invite strength. Fire was lit and kept burning through the night, a sign of life, a signal to ancestors, a warmth that told the spirits this was a safe place, this was a home for a soul to enter. And when the child came, when it cried or breathed or simply blinked its first time into the light, it was not just welcomed, it was recognized. People did not say, "What is it?" They said, "Who is it?" because they believed the child came already knowing, already being, not a blank slate, but a returning presence. Birth was mystery, it was power, it was holy, and every cry, every breath, every first touch was a reminder that the world was still turning and still full of wonder. In the quiet of an ancient night, when labor began, it was not the man who rushed into the room with tools or orders. It was the man who stepped back, who sat just outside the doorway or just beyond the fire, watching and waiting with silent breath. He did not enter the birth space, not because he was unwelcome, but because the act belonged to women, to the midwife, to the mother, to the grandmother. It was their moment, their ritual, their circle. So he waited, with hands clasped with eyes, watching the sky or the floor, with ears straining for the sounds from inside the moans. The footsteps, the whispers, the cry. In some cultures, he built the fire and kept it burning strong through the night, adding wood when the flames dipped low, checking the pot of water, checking the shadows for signs from the gods or signs from the wind. In other places, he offered prayers to spirits, to ancestors, to the sun or moon or the river outside. His home, asking for mercy, asking for strength, asking for both to return safely from that thin space between life and not yet. Some men sang outside the door, quiet, low songs passed down from their fathers, who had sung the same tunes on nights like this, when they too had waited for a life to arrive. That would change everything. Others carved wood to pass the time, shaping toys or tools or tokens for the baby with hands that shook not from fear, but from awe, because even if he could not see the moment, he knew its weight. And when the sound came, the cry, the small, sharp noise that broke the night, he rose, not quickly, but with care, because the moment was sacred and rushing would disturb it. He stepped into the room only when invited. He looked at the child only when shown, and when he touched the soft new skin of his child for the first time, he did not speak, because in that moment words were too small, too narrow, too noisy, and all he could offer was silence and warmth and eyes full of something too large to name. In ancient times, the man was not absent. He was near enough to feel the shift in the air, near enough to hold the moment in his chest, near enough to love from just outside the door. When the baby arrived, slick with blood and warmth and breath, the world did not cheer, it hushed. The fire crackled gently midwise, moved slowly, speaking only in whispers, and the air felt soft, as if it too understood that something sacred had just happened. The child was placed on the mother's chest, skin against skin, so that her warmth would surround it, her heartbeat would steady it, and her breath would remind it was no longer alone. There were no bright lights, no weighing scales, no flashing cameras, only warmth, only breath, only the low rhythm of the mother's heart echoing in the baby's tiny ears. The cord that had carried life for so many months pulsed gently, and when it stopped pulsing, when its work was done, it was cut, not with metal, but with sharpened stone or flint or a tool carved from bone or shell. And tucked in close so the baby felt like it had not left the womb, but had only shifted into another warm space. A tiny drop of oil might be placed on the baby's head, or between its eyes, or on the soles of its feet, not for health only, but for protection, for luck, for love. Some whispered the baby's name in its ear, even if it would not be spoken aloud for days or weeks or months. The name would be there tucked inside the baby's memory, like a seed ready to grow. The mother might close her eyes, or hum softly, or cry quietly, not from pain, but from something older than pain. The fullness of becoming not just a woman, but a mother, and feeling a life pressed to her chest that had not existed in the air a moment before. And for a while, time would slow, the fire would burn, the night would stretch, and no one would ask questions, or give advice, or make noise. They would only sit in the hush and watch the small miracle rest. In the ancient world, The days after birth were not filled with appointments or paperwork or bright lights. They were slow, gentle, and sacred, each hour held with softness, each moment guided by tradition and care. The mother remained where she had given birth, her body still open, still healing, still heavy with the memory of pain and the soft release of life. And around her, the world became smaller, quieter, slower. Women brought her food warm and soft, easy-to-eat soups made from herbs and roots and grains, seasoned not for flavor, but for strength, gentle on the stomach, and made with hands that had fed many mothers before the baby rarely left her side. It was carried on her chest, wrapped tightly against her heart, or laid in a basket beside the fire, or in a sling made from cloth tied over her shoulder, so the baby could sleep, hearing the rhythm of her breath. There were no strollers, no bottles, no lists of rules. There was only touch, only instinct, only the slow, steady remembering of what every mother knows in her bones, even if she has never done it before. In some cultures, ash was rubbed gently on the baby's skin to protect it from spirits. In others, the baby's feet were pressed lightly into soft clay to capture the print of a life. Just beginning sometimes, this clay was dried and kept for years as a quiet token. The umbilical stump was watched carefully, wrapped in cloth, rinsed with herbs or seawater or breast milk until it dried and fell away, returning a piece of life back to the earth it had come from. The baby was not bathed often, but wiped clean with warm cloths, sometimes scented with lavender or rose, or steeped in thyme, not for hygiene alone, but for comfort, for warmth, for the quiet feeling of being cared for. Names were sometimes given days. Later, after the baby had opened its eyes, after the family had watched it sleep, after dreams had come, sometimes a name would arrive in sleep, whispered by an ancestor, or felt in the wind, or seen in the way the baby moved. And through it all, the fire kept burning, the room stayed dim, the voices stayed low. Because this was not a time for noise or motion or celebration. This was a time for presence, for protection, for deep, unspoken love. For in the ancient world, a newborn was not just a baby. It was a visitor from somewhere, beyond, a new soul with old eyes and quiet breath. And those who welcomed it knew that every touch, every whisper, every moment mattered. In the still days that followed birth, the newborn child was seen not only as soft and small, but as sacred and fragile, like a flame flickering in a breeze, a breath that could be lost if the world was not careful. So ancient families watched closely. They wrapped the child not only in cloth, but in care, in intention, in small daily acts that quietly guarded a life so new it had barely opened its eyes. In many places, the baby was not taken outside for many days, sometimes 7, sometimes 10, sometimes longer, not because of weather, but because of belief. The outside world held unknown spirits, and the baby was still close to the spirit world it had just left. Amulets were tied around tiny wrists or ankles, carved from bone or wood, or shaped from soft metal and marked with symbols of protection. Some held beads, some held seeds, some held a bit of hair from the mother's head, braided tightly and blessed with breath. Elders whispered words over the baby, sleeping face, old chants passed down through centuries, words with no translation, only rhythm and faith meant to shield the child's dreams and steady its new heart. The air around the baby was scented with herbs, not just for smell, but for safety. Rosemary to guard against evil, lavender to calm time, to purify dried bundles, hung near the bed or tucked into the folds of the baby's wrap. In some homes, ashes from the hearth were marked on the baby's forehead in a single soft line said to ground the child to the earth. In others, A drop of honey was placed on the tongue to sweeten its path in life and remind it of warmth. Visitors did not touch the baby right away. They stood at a distance or offered small gifts, stones, feathers, coins, or milk placed quietly near the fire, as if asking permission to share in the moment. And always, the baby was held skin to skin, not passed from person to person, but kept close to the mother's body, her warmth, her breath, her heartbeat, the safest place the child could know. Because in the ancient world, protection did not come from walls or rules or science. It came from presence, from care, from watching, from loving, from believing that the world could be made gentle for just long enough for the child to grow strong. And so they guarded it, not with fear, but with peace, wrapping it in quiet, in warmth, in a world that moved a little slower, just for this tiny spark of life. When the newborn had taken its first breaths, and the home had returned to quiet, the time for welcome began not with loud cheers or music, but with small gestures, soft songs, and slow-moving ceremony in ancient China. A family might wait until the baby reached 1 full month of life before gathering loved ones under the roof of the home. This was the full moon celebration, when the child was considered strong enough to meet the world and receive its name. Red cloths were tied to the doorway, red being the color of luck and protection. Eggs were dyed red and given to neighbors, symbolizing fertility, renewal, and peace in parts of Africa. A naming ceremony might be held on the 7th day, with the baby placed gently on a special mat, surrounded by family. The elder would speak the chosen name aloud for the first time as water was poured around the child, as feet to invite a life that flowed like a river among the Celts in old Europe. The child would be presented to the morning sun on the 3rd day, lifted in gentle arms, and turned toward the rising light so that their life might begin with the blessing of warmth and clarity in ancient Jewish traditions. The naming of a baby girl might happen during the first reading of the Torah after birth, while the naming of a boy would come on the 8th day during the Brit Milah, a sacred moment of covenant and community. Some babies were passed through a circle of women who sang lullabies made of sounds older than language, while others were sprinkled with water from a sacred stream or kissed on the forehead by every elder present, each kiss a promise, each breath a wish. The celebration was not loud, it was not rushed, it was filled with patience and presence woven together with food that had meaning, bread for long, life milk for strength, honey for sweetness. And there was always song, not sung from stages or accompanied by instruments, but hummed around fires, murmured into sleeping ears, or sung softly by grandmothers, rocking slowly beneath the stars. These rituals were not performances, they were maps, gentle introductions from the family to the world, from the baby to the earth, from one generation to the next. They were ways of saying, you belong here, you are loved here, you carry our past and shape our future, and we welcome you with open arms and open hearts. And long after the ceremony ended, the memory of it stayed wrapped into the very walls of the home, echoing in every footstep, every sigh, every smile that followed the child through their earliest days in the soft days after birth. When the fire burned low and the home was wrapped in silence, feeding was not something scheduled or measured. It was something felt, something offered, something shared without needing words. The newborn lay against the mother's skin, barely separated from the body it had known for months, the place where it grew, the place where it listened to every heartbeat. And now, in the stillness of their shared breath, it found its first food, Breastfeeding in ancient times was not taught in classes or read about in scrolls. It was shown, it was remembered, it was known in the body, before the mind even asked. How? The baby latched, not always easily, not always quickly, but guided by instinct and patience, and the warm scent of the mother's skin and milk flowed, not by force, but by release, soft and slow, like water from a spring. The milk was not only food, it was medicine, it was warmth, it was protection, each drop carrying not just nourishment, but memory, the memory of love, the memory of safety, the memory of home. In ancient Egypt, the goddess Isis was often shown nursing her son. Horus, her body, calm her eyes, soft her arms full of quiet strength, a symbol of sacred motherhood, watched by generations of women who saw themselves in that image in Greece. Wet nurses were sometimes used women with milk to give who were trusted to carry the bond of feeding. When mothers could not, or chose not, to their role not less than a mother-s, but shaped by need and accepted with reverence in villages from Africa to Asia to the far islands of the sea. Grandmothers and aunts watched carefully, not to correct, but to support, showing mothers how to hold, how to soothe, how to rest when the body grew weary and the child would not sleep. There were no clocks, no feeding charts, only rhythm, only response when the baby stirred, when it cried, when it routed toward the chest. The mother offered her body again and again until the hunger passed and peace returned. And when the child grew, and the first teeth came, and the first tastes of soft food were offered, they were mashed roots, soaked grains, warmed broths, stirred with wooden spoons, and given slowly with laughter and quiet patience. Food was love, food was time, food was the tether that kept the child close to the body, close to the earth, close to a life that had begun not with noise, but with touch. Because in the ancient world, to feed a child was not just to nourish its body, it was to anchor its soul to the warmth of this world. In ancient times, sleep was not separated from life, it was a part of it. A rhythm that rose and fell with the sun, the moon, the wind outside, and the breath of those we loved. And when a baby was born, when the soft cries faded, and the body relaxed into the hush of home, it was sleep that welcomed them fully into the world, sleep that wrapped them like a blanket made from silence and time. There were no cribs shaped by machines, no instructions printed on paper. Only what was known by heart and made by hand. A woven basket lined with wool or straw or soft fabric passed down from sister to sister, filled with cloth worn thin. By years of use, the scent of other babies still clinging to it, like memory in some places, a wooden cradle carved with symbols of protection, animals, trees, waves, and suns. Painted with gentle colors or polished with oil from olives or seeds, a gift from father or grandfather, shaped slowly over many quiet evenings. Other times, a baby slept in the bed with the mother not because it was a trend, but because it was known to be right, to be close to hear the breath, to feel the warmth, to sense the safety of skin nearby. There were no monitors, no lullabies from machines, only the soft hum of a mother's song, half remembered from her own childhood, or the low steady crackle of the fire as it kept the shadows soft and warm. Blankets were made from wool spun and dyed and washed by hand, wrapped around the baby's body, tucked gently under the arms. Not too tight, not too loose, just enough to make them feel like the womb had never ended, only opened into something wider. In some homes, a pouch or sling was worn day and night, holding the baby against the chest, letting them doze through chores, through walking through the slow rhythm of daily exla. Life carried in motion, soothed by the rise and fall of breath. Sleep was not trained. It was followed like a stream into the forest, trusted to come and go, trusted to carry the baby through growth, through quiet, through dreams. And when the baby stirred in the night, there were no clocks, no panic, only the mother's hand reaching the soft sound of her voice, the familiar weight of love returning once again. Because, in the ancient world, sleep was not something to fight or force. It was a place, a return, a sacred hush, where life settled and grew, and the baby knew, without knowing, that they were held, that they were safe, that they were home in the deep hours of night. When the fire had burned low and only embers glowed in the hearth, a baby might twitch in its sleep, its eyes fluttering beneath soft lids, its lips moving as if remembering something unspoken to us now. It may seem like nothing, a reflex, a random signal from a resting brain, but in the ancient world, these moments were seen as something more. People believed that babies still carried traces of the spirit world from which they came, that their dreams were messages, memories, perhaps even visions, not yet faded by waking life. In ancient Mesopotamia, dream interpreters were respected and sought after, and while most people shared dreams through spoken words, some elders would sit near a sleeping baby and watch carefully, believing the child's movements might tell stories from the other side. If a newborn smiled in sleep, some said it was because angels were speaking to them. If they cried without waking, perhaps they were letting go of the life they lived before this one. Mothers were told to sleep nearby and observe, not to analyze, but to connect, to hold the baby's hand lightly and whisper prayers, not to stop the dream, but to guide it gently along a safe path. In India, old writings described life as a cycle with many returns, and some believed that infants might be dreaming of their past lives, remembering faces they once knew, rivers they once crossed, names they had forgotten, but still carried deep inside. In some African traditions, when a baby moved often in sleep or cried without waking, it was thought that an ancestor was visiting the child, passing wisdom, passing strength, or reminding them of the legacy they now carried in their small hands. The Norse believed that dreams could come from the gods, that sleep was not silence, but a doorway, and that even newborns sometimes stood near it, their souls brushing up against the world beyond with every rise and fall of breath. People placed soft charms near the baby's bed, not to ward off nightmares, but to honor dreams, to keep them pure, to welcome them with open hearts. Sometimes it was a feather, sometimes a polished stone, sometimes a carved figure passed down for generations. And when a baby woke, gently blinking in the dim light, stretching and yawning, the family smiled, not because the sleep had ended, but because the baby had returned from a journey and brought something silent and sacred back with them. Because in the ancient world, sleep was more than rest, and dreams were more than pictures. They were whispers of the soul, and newborns were seen not just as tiny bodies, but as travelers whose eyes still held stars, long before the child could speak, long before they knew the meaning of time or numbers or years. The people who loved them watched closely, remembering every small change like a sacred note in an ancient song. The first smile wasn't met with phones or cameras. It was greeted with awe, the way the stars are greeted. When they appear after a long, cloudy night, it meant more than joy. It meant presence, awareness, the baby seeing not just light, but love. The mother or grandmother would sing a new lullaby, the rhythm slow, the melody soft, perhaps repeating a family name or a wish or a prayer. So the smile would return and return again, like waves on a calm sea. When the baby first cooed, or made a sound deeper than breath, the room would quiet, not because it was loud, but because it was real, a voice beginning to remember its place in the world, and every murmur was listened to like prophecy. In some places, elders would respond by mimicking the sounds, giving the baby a gentle mirror in return, while in others, the baby's first sound was answered with a short poem or blessing carved into memory. The first time the baby sat up on its own hands, steady eyes wide, the moment was met with laughter, but also quiet pride, not rushed or celebrated loudly, but noted deeply, like the sun passing through a new window for the first time. In ancient Japan, a special pillow was given to the baby, on this day embroidered or painted by the hands of the women in the family, believed to carry not just support but guidance for posture and spirit. And when the baby crawled, when the legs and arms found their rhythm on cool floors or soft grass, mothers would clear a path not just with their hands but with their hearts, knowing the child had begun to seek the world in motion. In some cultures, they would lay out symbolic objects along the crawling path, a bowl of water, a wooden spoon, a piece of fruit, to see which the baby touched. First, a gentle way of guessing their future, or simply smiling at their curiosity. Then came the first tooth, not marked with charts, but often greeted with a small gift, a charm, a thread of silver, a dried flower pressed into a bundle and tied to the baby's blanket, a symbol of strength and new life. And when the baby took their first step, it was not into a crowd or a room full of applause, but often toward a quiet face they knew, a parent, a sibling, a grandparent, holding out their hands, not calling loudly, just waiting patiently. Sometimes the feet were dipped in cool water or marked with earth to bless the journey and remind the child that every step was sacred, even before they knew where they were going, because in the ancient world, milestones were not events to be performed. They were moments to be lived and remembered quietly, with eyes full of love and hearts full of wonder. In the ancient world, a baby's first toy was unbought, was made, shaped slowly from what the earth offered and what love imagined. There were no sharp colors or flashing lights, no music that came from wires, only the soft rattle of seeds in a hollow gourd, the smooth feel of carved wood, the gentle scent of dried flowers or leaves tucked inside a small pouch that crinkled when squeezed. A rounded stone warmed in the sun, polished by a river, might be placed in a baby's tiny hand just to feel the weight of the world, the texture of time. A carved animal figure, often made of clay or wood smoothed and shaped by fingers worn from weaving or grinding, might become the baby's first companion. Its silent face watched with wide eyes, its shape gripped with careful fingers. In some places, toys were passed from sibling to sibling, worn smooth by years of holding a simple doll made of cloth or straw or bone, dressed in scraps of fabric, faded by light and memory, but still full of story. The doll was not just a plaything, it was a reflection, a friend, a way to learn comfort, to practice care, to mimic the gentle ways a mother held her child or a father sang to the fire. In Egypt, children played with clay animals, dogs, birds, horses painted with mineral pigments in soft red and black, with simple lines and careful curves. In ancient Greece, a ball made from pig's bladder or cloth tied tightly with string was tossed and caught between small hands, laughter, soft and brief, echoing against stone walls, or among olive trees. In parts of Africa, small carved instruments were given to babies, a thumb piano or a tiny drum, not loud but soft enough to soothe the senses, to teach rhythm, to let the baby, as fingers, feel the vibration of sound. Strings of beads, not for fashion, but for touching, for learning shapes, colors, textures, sometimes tied to a mother S-wrap, so the baby could play while being carried close. And there were games that required no objects, only faces and voices and patience. The peekaboo of every culture, where the face disappears and reappears, and the baby laughs, not just because it's funny, but because it teaches trust and return play, was not about stimulation. It was about presence. It was about learning the world slowly, with the hands, with the mouth, with the eyes, with the heart. Because in the ancient world, toys were not distractions, they were connections between the child and the earth, the family, the spirit of time, and the joy of simply being alive. In the ancient world, learning did not begin with the turning of a page, but with the turning of a face toward a parent, a grandparent, a sibling, a basket, a fire, a stone. A child's education started not with pencils, but with the senses, with the warmth of dough in a wooden bowl, with the scent of crushed herbs on fingertips, with the sound of grinding grain in the early hours of morning. No one told the baby to sit and listen, but still the baby learned by watching, by copying, by absorbing the rhythms of life that echoed through the home. The mother's movements as she spun wool or pounded roots, the father's posture as he shaped a tool, the way a pot was held over the fire, or how hands were washed before meals, all became lessons without words. In ancient China, young children would listen to elders recite lines of wisdom, soft and slow, not as commands, but as lullabies. So the words would settle into the mind like seeds waiting to grow. In many African cultures, stories were the classroom told beneath trees, beside fires, in rooms where the only light came from oil lamps. Every tale, a lesson wrapped in character, every voice a thread woven into the child's heart. No need for textbooks when a child could hear the story of a clever fox, a kind spirit, a brave sister who crossed the river, all stories that taught patience, kindness, cleverness, and the unspoken rules of the world. Sometimes children learned from silence, sitting beside a grandmother who wove baskets or stirred thick soups, not speaking, but watching the way she moved, the rhythm of her breath, the care in her fingers. Children learned their names by hearing them repeated, with love their place in the family, by how often they were held their place in the world, by how often they were told, "You belong here." In Nordic villages, children watched the weather, the sky, the trees, to understand time. They listened to the wind, to learn direction. They played in snow and sea, to understand the body and its strength. In ancient Mesopotamia, clay tablets were pressed by hands that had been shown the signs day after day. The language of trade and harvest passed on, not for tests, but for survival. Learning was not hurried. It came like spring after winter, gently, persistently, until one day the child knew how to shape dough, how to light a fire, how to speak truth, how to stay silent, because in the ancient world, knowledge was not stored on paper, but in hands, in hearts, in songs, in the quiet way. A child leaned forward when they were ready to learn. In the gentle hush of an ancient morning, before the sun rose too high, and before the tasks of the day had begun, a mother or elder would dress the child, not with urgency, not with style, but with rhythm, with care, with calm. The clothing of infants and young children was simple, often one long cloth or tunic wrapped or folded around the body, fastened not with buttons, but with ties, knots, or even just the baby's own weight pressing the folds into place. In ancient Egypt, babies wore very little at all. The warm sun and sandy ground made. Soft skin, easier to carry, and so a child might wear nothing more than a charm around the neck, or a narrow strip of linen for modesty and ease. As the child grew, a simple linen tunic appeared bleached, pale by the sun, tied at the waist or left loose. The fabric light, the edges soft, the colors faded but clean-shaped, more by function than form. In cold lands where snow whispered against wooden walls, children were wrapped in wool spun, thick and warmed by the breath of animals and the touch of fire. In Norse homes, mothers sewed tiny cloaks of sheepskin with hoods that curled gently around the baby's face to keep out wind and cold, tied gently beneath the chin with leather cords. Softened over time among nomadic tribes, small boots were made from hide lined with fur to cradle feet that had not yet walked, soles stitched carefully with bone needles, hands guiding each loop like a quiet song. Children's clothes were not bright, they were not loud, they were not meant to stand out, but to keep warm, to stay dry, to allow sleep and stillness and movement all at once. A child's tunic might be passed down from sibling to sibling, patch over patch, thread over thread, the cloth itself carrying memory, the wear of hands, the sound of laughter, the scent of oil and ash. And on special days, a child might wear something with color, a belt dyed with berries, a bead sewn into a seam, a ribbon gifted by a grandmother long ago worn on the wrist or in the hair. There were no mirrors, only eyes watching with care, only voices saying gently, "You look ready for the day, you look just right." Because in the ancient world, to clothe a child was not to display them, it was to shield them, to wrap them in the world. Softness to prepare them for the breeze, the sun, the steps ahead, the arms that would carry them again and again. In the still moments between sunrise and the first stirring of daily work, there was a time set aside for care, for cleansing, not rushed, not loud, but wrapped in calm rhythm and warmth. A pot of water warmed beside the fire, not too hot, not too cold, stirred with a wooden spoon or finger until the elder woman, often the grandmother, nodded that it was just right. A soft cloth, maybe old, maybe woven long ago, was folded and placed nearby, not to scrub, but to wrap, to hold, to soothe. The baby was undressed slowly, the cloth peeled away like the petals of a flower, one layer at a time, never waking them, to suddenly, always, with a whisper and a kiss on the forehead in ancient Rome. Public bathhouses were for the grown, but at home the mother knelt beside a shallow basin carved from stone or clay and poured water gently from a small jug onto her baby's back, her movements slow, like rain falling on still earth. She hummed, not a song with words, but a melody passed down from her own mother and grandmother, a tune that only babies seemed to understand in ancient India. A paste of herbs and oils might be used, soft mixtures of sandalwood, turmeric, or neem, not to perfume, but to protect and soothe, brushed gently onto the skin, then rinsed away with clean water. In desert lands where water was scarce, babies were wiped with soft sand, and scented smoke passed over their skin, not harsh, not dry, but a ritual of grounding, a blessing of earth and air. Fingers moved over each tiny limb, checking folds for warmth, smoothing skin for comfort, whispering safety with every touch. The bath was never just for cleanliness, it was for connection. The feet were cupped and cleaned, the hands were opened and washed, the head was held gently as a few drops of water fell across the scalp, like a soft rain across new soil. The baby was rarely alone in this moment. Someone always nearby, someone watching, smiling, handing cloths or drying blankets folded beside the fire, ready to wrap the baby again, like returning them to the womb. Once the washing was done, the baby was swaddled, tight skin, warm and fresh, the scent of herbs or wood, smoke still clinging to their hair and their lashes flickering like candlelight as sleep returned. There was no rush, no schedule, only presence, only care, only the quiet understanding that in those moments of water and touch, the child was not just clean, but loved, protected, anchored to the earth and to the arms that held them in the ancient world. The arrival of a child was not just a moment of joy, it was a moment of deep attention, because every breath, every beat, every blink of those small eyes was a reminder of life's fragility. There were no hospitals down the road, no pharmacies, no monitors, but there was memory and love and knowledge shaped by time and silence. A mother would watch her child not just with her eyes, but with her whole being, noticing the color of the skin, the temperature of the hands, the rhythm of the baby's breathing. If something seemed off, a grandmother might whisper a prayer into the room, lighting a small bundle of herbs, letting the smoke rise slowly, watching as it curled and drifted, as if listening for the answer in the way it moved. In many cultures, charms were made not for decoration, but for protection. A small shell tied to a string, a red thread wound around the baby's wrist, a carved bead tucked beneath a blanket to keep bad spirits away. In ancient Mesopotamia, clay amulets shaped like gods or protective animals were placed near cradles, believed to ward off sickness and fear. Their rough edges smoothed by many years and many hands in African tribes. Protective songs were sung at sunrise, not loud or fierce, but steady, full of belief, full of promise, full of calm, telling the child, "You are watched, you are loved, you are safe." Fathers might carve a small symbol into a doorpost above the place where the baby slept, not to frighten, but to mark a boundary, to say, "Here life begins, and here it must be protected." In ancient India, oil was warmed and massaged into the baby's skin each morning, the act not just for softness, but to strengthen the bones, to warm the joints, to ease the breath, to bring balance between body and spirit. If illness came, the family gathered not in panic, but in closeness. They brewed herbs, crushed leaves, boiled roots, laid cool cloths on small foreheads, and sang songs older than memory. They believed healing came not only from plants or fire, but from love, from touch, from keeping the baby surrounded by voices familiar and low. Safety meant something deeper than guarding against harm. It meant creating a world small enough for the baby to know every sound, every face, every hand that held them, because in the ancient world, protection was not made of walls or rules. It was made of presence, of belief, of doing the same quiet things every day with the same careful love. The hush of the evening, when the fires dimmed and the day softened into night, a mother would hold her baby, close her voice, low her breaths, steady the room around them still, and listening, she didn't need an instrument, just her hum, just the rise and fall of melody shaped not by training but by love, passed from lips to ears, through generations of mothers, grandmothers, and sisters, but to protect, to call in peace and keep away the wandering spirits of night. In ancient Greece, lullabies were called aesos, short melodic poems, often filled with repetition and rhyme. Their purpose not only to soothe, a line like "Sleep, little olive leaf, sleep under the moonlight," might be sung again and again, until the child's eyelids lowered slowly, like petals at dusk. In Egypt, lullabies spoke of the Nile, its slow, steady waters, the reeds whispering at its edges, the way the crocodile slipped silently past, all turned into song, not to frighten, but to ground the baby in the world. They de-entered a mother's hum, would mimic the wind or the sound of birds or the soft drumming of fingers on clay, each note a layer of comfort wrapped around the child like a second blanket. In many African villages, lullabies were also stories about animals, clever turtles, loyal lions, patient birds, every creature carrying a lesson, but told with a calm voice and a soft rhythm that blurred the lines between learning and dreaming. In Viking homes, lullabies were chanted low, almost like a breath, the words often mentioning ancestors, gods, or the warmth of the hearth promising the baby they were never alone, that even the night watched kindly over them, and the room settled into stillness as if the song had folded the whole world into a cradle. In India, lullabies often included the names of deities, but sung like a whisper, a prayer with rhythm and sweetness, meant not to teach devotion, but to bring calm, to settle the baby's heart, and to invite sleep like a gentle guest. A baby didn't need to understand the words, the tone, the rhythm, the pauses between notes. All worked quietly on their own like waves, smoothing sand, or leaves brushing against one another in a breeze. And as the baby drifted closer to sleep, the mother's voice slowed, the song softened, the hum became a breath. Because in the ancient world, lullabies were not performances. They were anchors, invisible threads that held the baby gently to the earth, to the family, to the night, and mothers placed amulets beside them, small carved eyes or animals to guard their dreams. When night settled over the ancient world, it came not with alarms or glowing screens, but with silence, the kind of silence that moves slowly through rooms, that remember a baby's sleep began in arms, wrapped close to the body of someone whose heartbeat was known, soft and familiar and full of comfort. There were no cribs with painted wood or padded edges. Instead, there were woven baskets tucked with wool or straw or cloth, lined with the smell of sun and earth, and shaped by hands that worked with care. But at night, they were unwrapped, slowly, their tiny arms stretching wide, their faces relaxed, their breath falling into the rhythm of rest, but for stillness, so that the body could rest and grow without stirring in the cold, and presence a belief that the body would rest when it was safe, when it was full, when it was heard. In ancient Egypt, infants slept in shallow reed baskets, raised slightly above the ground to stay cool in the heat. In colder lands, wooden cradles were carved by hand, simple and sturdy, their rockers smoothed by years of motion, by generations of babies swaying gently in firelight. Lulled by the creak of old floors and the sighs of evening, some babies were tucked into fur-lined hammocks strung between posts, gently swinging like leaves on a breeze, the motion slow, predictable, like the rhythm of a mother's breath. Others slept between parents, on mats made of straw or hide, wrapped in layers of cloth tied loosely at the waist, not for style. In nomadic families, the baby was often wrapped tightly and carried during the day, strapped to a back or chest. Some cultures kept a small fire burning all night, not just for warmth, but as a guardian flame, the flicker casting shadows on the wall, stories made of light and movement, watched by half-open baby eyes before they drifted closed. And when the wind howled, or rain tapped on the roof, or wolves cried far away, the baby stayed close to warmth, close to the quiet, sound of someone humming near the fire, close to the walls that held them like a second womb, and back the baby suspended softly, their tiny legs, folded, their head pressed gently near the heart, soothed by rhythm, scent, and song. There was no concept of sleep training, only sleep welcoming, no rush, no fear, just patience. Because in the ancient world, A baby-S bed was not made of furniture. It was made of touch and smell and heartbeat, a place woven out of nearness and shaped by stillness from the first moment a baby took its breath. It was held not just for comfort, but for survival, held in arms, wrapped in cloth slung over shoulders, tied to chests and backs. In every way, the child stayed close to warmth and motion. In ancient Africa, long before woven carriers became common, mothers wrapped babies in wide cloths, called kente or barcloth. The fabric tied across the back or breast. The baby nestled against the skin, feeling each footstep like a lullaby. In ancient Andean regions, mothers used shawls, called likalas, colorful and hand-woven, draped diagonally across the back, tied at the front, with the baby snug and secure, their face peeking out to see the light and shapes of the world. In Japan, traditional garments called onbuhimo were used by parents to carry babies high on their backs, wrapped tightly in soft cloths, allowing the baby to feel every breath and sway as they moved between forest and home. Among the nomadic tribes of Central Asia, babies were swaddled in felt or soft wool and tied to cradles or boards. Shaped from curved wood, these boards were then strapped to the backs of parents as they rode across vast landscapes of wind and silence. In ancient Rome, wealthier women employed nurses to carry babies in arms or wraps, but the poor used strips of linen, often part of the same garment. They wore the baby bound gently against the chest, so that work could continue while love remained constant. In India, mothers used saris or long dupattas, wrapped creatively across their torso, and could continue to feed another child, their role one of honor and deep trust. There were no buckles, no instructions, just knowledge passed from mother to daughter, from aunt to sister, from observation, from trial and trust. Sometimes babies were carried during sleep, their bodies swaying gently with the parent's motion, the hum of conversation or wind in trees, rocking them deeper into slumber than any cradle could offer. And roots strained through cloth, cooled with breath, and given slowly spoon by handmade spoon. Sometimes the cloth was scented with herbs or oils. Sometimes it held stitched charms, tiny coins, feathers, or beads, believed to offer protection as the baby moved through space, seen and unseen. To be carried was not simply a way to move a baby. It was a language of closeness, a way of saying, you belong with me in every step, every path, every part of this journey. Because in the ancient world, to carry a child was not a task. It was a continuation of the womb, an embrace, made visible, a song written in fabric, breath, and heartbeat. In the ancient world, the first food was not made in a factory, but in the body, born of warmth and rhythm, shaped by the pulse of closeness and trust. A newborn's very first meal came not from a container, but from the mother herself, her arms wrapped around the baby, their breath mingling the space between them, soft and sacred. Breastfeeding was not a choice or a plan. It was simply the way the world began, one mouth, one breast, one heartbeat between them. Shared slowly, often again. No schedule, no timer, just the body responding to need. In ancient Egypt, mothers nursed their babies in shaded courtyards, beneath palm trees where the wind stirred linen curtains, and the baby's fingers clutched softly at their mother's necklace or scarf. In ancient China, it was common for wet nurses to be employed among wealthier families, women who had recently given birth. But in most homes and villages, it was the mother herself who fed the child in the morning, in the afternoon, beneath stars near the fire, with no need for privacy. No shame, only rhythm and care. And when the baby grew, when their gums began to press, when their eyes watched food being chewed, when small fingers reached toward bowls, then came the second part of feeding. There were no blenders, no jars, just warm porridge, mashed with fingers, soft vegetables, ground with stones, soups made from grains. In ancient Mesopotamia, babies might taste barley, gruel, or goat. Milk stirred with date syrup, or ground legumes, softened until smooth, eaten from the fingertips of a parent, or from a carved wooden spoon. In the Nordic regions, small pieces of fish or oats were mashed and fed between songs and stories. Their warmth wrapped in wool, their meals taken near the fire's glow, where wind rattled the windows, but sleep came soon after. In the warmer lands of India, babies tasted mashed lentils or rice mixed with a drop of ghee, offered in small touches over many days, watched carefully for every reaction, every blink, every smile. There were no instructions, only memory, only the mother's sense of readiness, the father's quiet encouragement, the siblings' laughter as they offered a bit of fruit or soft bread from their own meal. Feeding was slow, unhurried, each taste a conversation, each meal a moment of teaching, where texture, temperature, and flavor were introduced with patience and love. And through it all, one truth held firm, that food was not simply fuel, it was comfort, it was connection, it was the gift of life, carried hand to mouth, shared breath to breath, again and again. There was no grand celebration, no cameras, no countdown clocks, just a quiet awareness, a silent watchfulness that knew when a baby's toes began to press against the ground, when their arms reached not just to be carried, but to balance. A baby's first steps came not with instruction, but with encouragement, with laughter, with outstretched arms. Waiting just a little distance away, their voice warm and full of trust, saying, "Come here," softly, gently, as if calling a bird from the branch. In ancient Greece, children walked barefoot over smooth tiles and warm stone floors, their steps guided by echoes, their falls cushioned by mats of wool and cloth, always followed by laughter and gentle hands. In the villages of early Japan, small toddlers wandered along narrow wooden halls, held upright by low furniture, soft sandals, or the edges of long robes. Their steps slow, deliberate, guided by rhythm rather than urgency. In desert communities, walking came with the sand pressing back with softness, every step more a discovery than a task, the child leaning against their mother's robe or toddling toward the shadow of a tent post. There were no walkers, no rails, only the steady presence of someone nearby, someone who did not rush, who did not compare, who simply waited and welcomed when the child was ready to rise. And just as steps arrived, so too did the sounds, the coos, the hums, the half-words that curled in the throat like waves before they knew how to crash. A baby's first words came not in silence, but from a sea of voices, from mothers singing while grinding grain, from fathers humming while tying knots, from older siblings playing nearby, muttering stories under their breath. The words were simple, warm, soft, "Mama Baba Waterbird," "Fire Home," repeated again and again, wrapped in smiles, until they settled into the child's lips like seeds in gentle soil. In ancient Sumer, babies were spoken to as if they already knew everything, their names repeated, their moods echoed, their sounds answered with care, as if even their babble was sacred. In early African communities, songs were built from a baby's own syllables turned into lullabies, chants, phrases of welcome, the child learning not just to speak, but to join in a conversation that began before they were born. And when that first word came, it was not written down or measured. It was met with joy, soft celebration, the kind that fills a room like the scent of fresh bread, a whisper of yes, they are becoming. Because in the ancient world, every step, every sound was a shared journey between child and family, and no moment was too small to notice or too brief to hold. In the warm corners of ancient homes, among woven mats and stone floors, where the scent of bread lingered and firelight danced quietly, children played, and the world opened softly to them. There were no shelves of packaged toys, no bright labels or jingles, only the gifts of nature, the leftovers of work, and the creativity of tired but loving hands. In ancient Egypt, small dolls were carved from wood or fashioned from clay, their limbs painted with care, their hair sometimes made of string or twisted linen, tiny eyes inked on with coal or berry juice, held gently hugged, whispered to, as if alive, and dolls with moving joints, their faces worn smooth from hours of play in Rome. Children had toys made from ivory or bronze spinning tops that whirled on smooth tiles. Carved animal figurines pulled with strings. In ancient India, children played with miniature carts made from terracotta wheels, spinning slowly as they pushed them along dusty paths or smoothed out patches of floor. Their laughter, rising like birds. At sunrise, pebbles became soldiers, feathers became wands, string was twisted into little nooses for catching dreams and insects and sometimes wishes. In the homes of Norse families, children whittled little boats from bark, floated them in puddles, watched as wind carried their fleets. Across shallow pools, their minds adrift in faraway lands. Before their feet had ever left home, children played games using bones of animals. Tiny knuckle bones tossed and counted like dice, their clatter soft like rain on a roof, their meanings made up as they went along. In ancient China, spinning tops shaped from gourds or wood buzzed gently across stone floors, and little whistles, shaped like birds, chirped when blown, their sound light and fleeting like the calls of dusk. Some toys were never meant to last: a doll made from straw and string, a flute carved from a reed, a mask painted with soot and water, made to frighten or entertain during festivals and evenings filled with story. And not all toys were objects. Sometimes play was made of shadow and light, of running through fields, of pretending to be deer, or kings of mimicking the grown, with sticks for swords and laughter for music. What mattered most was not what the toy was made of, but that it had been given, that someone had shaped it, offered it, and smiled as they placed it into small, waiting hands. Because in the ancient world, toys were not distractions. They were invitations to dream, to wonder, to build, to imagine, to connect with the people and the earth that shaped every child's first steps toward becoming. There were no desks, no bells, no rows of wooden benches. Instead, there was space, open and slow, where learning crept in like the morning sun stretching across the floor without a sound. A child's first teacher was often their mother or father or an older sibling, someone close, someone whose words flowed like wind through trees, shaping the mind without pressing too hard. In ancient Africa, children learned by watching, by helping, by repeating small tasks, until they became natural, gathering water, balancing it in clay pots, learning which herbs calmed a fever, or which path led safely through the trees. In early Mesopotamia, clay tablets were etched with symbols by older scribes. But long before a child held a stylus, they listened, they mimicked, they recited old tales by heart, their voice quiet, their eyes wide. their feet tucked beneath them on woven mats. In ancient Greece, boys sat beneath shaded columns, while philosophers spoke in questions, not answers, encouraging thought, not memorization, while girls learned in the home beside their mothers, learning rhythm and responsibility through weaving and song. In rural China, children followed their grandparents through rice paddies and herb gardens, watching, listening, memorizing which leaves to use, which animals to feed, which stars to trust. In indigenous American tribes, learning came through story, the kind of story told at dusk around a low fire with flickering shadows and voices that paused, often letting the silence fill in the lesson. Children learned to listen with their whole body, to know when to speak and when to wait, how to spot tracks in the dust, how to shape clay without cracking it, how to soothe a crying sibling with just a quiet hum. In India, under banyan trees, young students gathered with elders who spoke of God's seasons, animals, and virtues. Each story wrapped in gentle rhythm, each pause a place for thought. There were no exams, only questions asked at the right time. Like, what do you notice? How does it smell? Which way is the wind moving? Why does the moon follow us? Children learned with their hands in flour, their feet in water, their ears tuned to wind, their eyes watching fire, their hearts slowly unfolding to the rhythm of days shaped by community and calm. Because in the ancient world, learning was not something added to the child. It was something drawn out, shaped carefully by patience, trust, and the deep belief that wisdom was already there waiting. When the world was quiet, when the embers of the fire glowed low, and the wind brushed softly past the doors of stone or straw, a child would close their eyes and step quietly into a world where nothing needed to make sense, and yet everything felt familiar. There were no books about sleep cycles, no dream journals, no analysis, only the hush of belief that dreams were important messages, sent by gods, by spirits, or by the soul itself wandering gently through the night. In ancient Egypt, dreams were seen as sacred, their meanings carried in symbols like birds, snakes, water, and sky. And when a child awoke, speaking of flying or being chased, elders listened closely, sometimes consulting temple dream interpreters, who recorded meanings on papyrus scrolls with soft ink and steady hands. In Babylon, clay tablets held fragments of dream interpretation passed from priest to priest, telling what it might mean. If a child dreamed of walking through water, or being kissed by the moon, or holding a broken reed in their hand. In ancient Greece, children's dreams were thought to be reflections of the body, the soul, and even messages from gods like Hypnos and Morpheus, and families listened to those midnight stories with gentle interest, as if holding a lantern to the inner world of the child. Sometimes a dream of running through fields was seen as a sign of strength. Sometimes a dream of falling from a tree was taken as a warning, or perhaps just a reminder to hold the child closer that day, to be more present, and in the early morning, quiet just before the dew-dried dream. Stories were spoken aloud around the fire like soft offerings to the day. In ancient India, dreams were folded into philosophy gently and with care, where even a bird flitting past in sleep was seen as a symbol worth noticing, worth honoring. And so parents listened not to fix, but to understand. Among indigenous peoples across the Americas, dreams were shared openly, especially by children, seen as messages from ancestors or the land itself, and bone designed to catch bad dreams and let only the soft ones pass through like clouds drifting across the moon. A child who dreamed of wolves was not frightened but listened to a story about the wolf's loyalty and power, a lesson wrapped in comfort, a meaning given without fear. Some families kept small dream charms, hung above the place where a baby slept, tiny woven circles of string. Children were taught to speak of their dreams with kindness, not to dismiss them, not to be afraid, but to see them as visitors, guides, or silent songs whispering from inside. And when a child smiled in their sleep, or whimpered, or reached out to nothing in the dark, parents did not rush. Instead, they watched quietly. They waited until peace returned like a tide, and the baby's breath slowed again into soft rhythm. Because in the ancient world, dreams were never just shadows. They were soft maps of the spirit, soft echoes of the waking world, and soft bridges to what lay just beyond the eyes. When the day came to its end, and the stars began to flicker into place, when animals settled and fire dimmed, there were no bedtime apps or soothing playlists, only the sound of a mother's voice carrying through the hush of evening. She would begin softly, not loudly, not for performance, but for peace. Her words, barely above a whisper, a sound meant only for the ears of the little one in her arms or lying beside her. In ancient Africa, lullabies were rhythmic and low, sometimes nothing more than hums, woven with the rustling of grass or the distant sound of crickets, a song that mirrored the earth. Sewn heartbeat in Mesopotamia clay tablets recorded fragments of songs. Mothers once sang, long before alphabets took shape, songs of birds and water and stars that never left the sky, no matter how long the night stretched. A Roman mother might sing of Lares, the household spirits, watching over the sleeping child, promising protection till the sun rose again. Each line short and gentle, each note like a hand brushing back hair from the forehead. In early Celtic lands, lullabies were filled with nature, the wind, the fox, the river, always moving, always near. The child was reminded that the world outside was not frightening, but full of rhythm, and friends who watched quietly from the trees. In India, a lullaby might speak of the moon's journey across the sky, or the cow resting nearby, or a sibling fast asleep in the next room, the melody simple, repeating like breath. Like waves on the shore, the lyrics were rarely written down. They changed with each singer, shaped by mood, by the weight of the child in the arms, by how the stars looked that night, or what the wind had whispered earlier that day. Some songs promised safety, some told soft stories, some had no words at all, only the vowel sounds that felt round and soft, like stones polished by years of rivers. Sometimes it was the father who sang, his voice deep and slow. Sometimes a grandparent brushing an old hand down the baby's back as they hummed a song once sung to them long ago. There were no rules, no perfect pitch, only presence, only love made into sound, made into stillness. Because in the ancient world, a lullaby was not just a song. It was a blanket made of voice, a hand that held without touching, a whisper that said, "I am here, and all is well." In the ancient world, bedtime was not a rush. It was a winding down, a soft descent into rest, guided by nature and the quiet cues of the home. When shadows lengthened and birds fell silent, when tools were cleaned and tucked away, when the cooking fire softened to a low ember, the day whispered that it was time to rest. Children did not need reminders. Their bodies felt the rhythm. Their eyes grew heavy as the light changed from sun to fire, from fire to stars. Their heads leaned on shoulders without a word. But in sound, in light, in motion, blankets or hides were spread, soft mats laid in corners. The ground swept clear of sharpness. In early homes made of stone or earth or timber, the air at night grew cooler and the rooms smaller, not in size in Egypt, The warm desert wind slowed, and families laid on raised beds or simple mats, sometimes covered by mosquito nets woven from linen, sometimes beneath open windows carved with lattice, letting in only the quiet. In Greece, oil lamps flickered gently on clay shelves, casting wide, slow-moving shadows on walls, as children yawned and curled beside one another, their day folding gently into dreams. In the huts of the North, furs were tucked tightly around shoulders, little fingers pressed into woolen sleeves, and the sound of snow outside only made the quiet warmth inside feel deeper. In India, families prepared for sleep with warm oils, rubbed gently onto arms and feet, sometimes with chants or soft verses, repeated not as prayers, but as pathways to stillness, a rhythm for the body to follow toward silence. Some children fell asleep to the sound of a story, a voice soft and steady telling of gods or animals or wise. Wanderers never rushed, always gentle, the story not needing to finish, only needing to soothe. In many homes, incense or herbs were burned, not for aroma, but for calm, dried lavender or myrrh or neem curling into the air like soft gray ribbon, leaving behind the scent of peace. And even when nothing was spoken, bedtime was a shared space. A long exhale from every member of the home, from child to elder, a collective nod to the night. Sometimes families sang together one last time, or sat in stillness together, their breath in quiet harmony before each turned inward into their private world of dreams. There was no fear of the dark, only a trust that morning would return, and until then the world could be quiet and safe, the way it had always been, because in the ancient world, sleep was not an interruption. It was part of life's rhythm, a sacred pause, a return to stillness, where even the smallest hearts could rest without fear, and where messages might come from gods, from ancestors, from the hidden parts of the world, and return with secrets hidden in dreams. Temples were built for dream rituals, and those who interpreted sleep were honored as wise, and poppies bloomed from the earth. When he touched a forehead with his feather, sleep came like a breeze over calm water. To us today, sleep is often something we squeeze between busy hours, something routine yet unnoticed. But to the ancients, sleep was something deeper, something almost magical, something to be respected. Sleep was not just rest, it was a journey, a soft crossing into a place where the soul could wander, where the body could heal, but did not vanish, where the self remained whole and untouched beyond dreams, and waking the soul rested in its truest form. In ancient Egypt, sleep was a doorway to the divine, a time when the soul might travel beyond the body. But treated with quiet respect, children were told to sleep facing a certain direction or under certain symbols to protect their journeys to the Greeks. Sleep was a gift from Hypnos, the gentle god, who lived in a cave where night flowed like a river. But the soul stirred quietly, sometimes gently, sometimes with messages that would not be understood until many nights later. Survival, but for emotional and spiritual alignment, the body's way of falling back into harmony with the Tao. But with quiet awe, knowing they would wake again, changed, even just a little softened by silence, shaped by the invisible hand of sleep, but a chapter in the life of the soul, that what we learn, while still may be as deep as what we learn while moving. Romans valued rest as a way to maintain balance in both body and mind. They bathed before sleep. They told stories. They believed that poor sleep meant unrest in the soul, and to sleep well was a sign of harmony with nature and fate. In early Chinese tradition, sleep was seen as a return to yin, the dark, cool stillness that balanced the heat and motion of the day. It was necessary, not just for Indian texts like the Vedas and later the Upanishads. Sleep was a sacred state where consciousness dissolved and steady, as if reminding the soul that it too had woken from the night as long journey, but with presence, a soft hand, a humming tune, the scent of bread or broth filling the air before any words were even spoken. For many indigenous cultures, sleep was when the spirit left the body and could speak with the animals, with ancestors, with the stars. It was not to be feared. The night was not empty to the ancients. It was full of movement and meaning. The body lay still, but gently nudged by the sounds they had always known. The creak of wood, the splash of water, the soft hum of someone preparing the day. People prepared for sleep, not just by resting the body, but by preparing the space, by calming the mind, by offering thanks, sometimes through whispered words, through soft chants, or even a single breath drawn slowly and released. They understood something. We often forget that sleep was not just the peeper end of the day, but to re-enter the world, to place your feet back into the story of the day with care, with attention, with thanks. And so, night after night, as the stars returned and fires dimmed, ancient people closed their eyes, not with worry. In the ancient world, waking was never rushed. There were no buttons to press, no blue screens, no voices urging you to hurry. Instead, waking happened, like the sky brightening little by little from within, before the sun even showed its full face. The world began to whisper. Animals stirred the wind, rustled through trees. The coals in the hearth glowed softly under layers of ash, and somewhere a mother stretched her limbs. Quietly, without sound, children opened their eyes, slowly blinking in the low light of morning, not startled, not pulled from sleep. In ancient Egypt, the day often began with a small prayer or offering to the gods. A drop of water spilled, a whisper said toward the sun as it climbed once again across the eastern sky. It was not about obligation, but about rhythm, connection, returning to the dance of light and shadow in early Rome. Children rose from warm beds, layered with wool and linen, and touched the ground with bare feet, cool and smooth. They washed their hands and faces, not for cleanliness alone, but to greet the new day like a guest entering the home. In India, the day often started with sound, not noise, but a gentle chime, a soft chant, a word that meant something ancient. Waking was a family affair. In many homes, the first to rise stirred the others, not with urgency. In early Chinese villages, waking might include brushing the body with long, gentle strokes, using bamboo brushes or smooth cloths to awaken the skin and remind the muscles of their purpose before lifting even a single tool. Children were rarely scolded for sleeping long, nor rushed into their chores. Instead, they were eased into movement, into sound their dreams, slowly releasing them like clouds passing behind a mountain. Sometimes, before speaking, people looked to the sky or stood still for a moment, not for worship, but for awareness, the way you might pause before entering a garden, just to notice the scent of it, the way the wind moves, the way the sun touches the leaves. And in that stillness, they remembered something we often lose, that to wake up is not just to open your eyes. Because in the ancient world, waking was not a chore. It was a return, a welcome, a quiet reminder that you are still here, and the world still turns gently around you. The chill of night, when the wind crept through doorways and frost touched the corners of homes. Warmth was not expected, it was created, it was held, it was treasured like a candle lit in deep winter. Before sleep, children were wrapped not just in cloth, but in care, in layers of wool or fur or straw, in the breath of the fire. And the presence of those who loved them, warmth, came slowly and stayed. because it was never taken for granted but to share. Body heat children pressed beside siblings' mothers, curled around infants. Fathers added logs to the fire without being asked. In ancient caves and huts, people slept close, not only to share stories. In Mesopotamia, clay walls and thick mats helped insulate against the desert night, and families draped heavy woven cloth over their sleeping places, cloth made from sheep's wool spun by hand, sometimes dyed in colors that reminded them of sunlight and earth. But for heat and near them, children were dressed in tunics with layers underneath and cloaks laid gently across their backs. In colder places, the furs of animals were used not only as clothing, but as blankets, large pieces of bear or deer fur stretched over sleeping children, soft on one side, rough on the other, holding warmth like a second skin. In Roman homes, fires burned in braziers, metal bowls of glowing coals, placed carefully in corners, not for light. Before sleep, how to tuck sleeves into sleeves, how to breathe slowly so the air inside their blanket nest stayed warmer, longer. In China, charcoal stoves were kept in safe spaces, vented to carry the smoke away, yet offering slow warmth through the night. Families slept on platforms slightly raised from the floor, with padded quilts filled with cotton or down. Children learned early how to warm stones in the fire, to wrap them in cloth and place them at their feet. In the far north, where snow lay deep outside, children wore caps, even while they slept, soft wool pulled low over their ears, mittens sometimes tied to wrists, to keep tiny hands safe from the sting of frost. Warmth came from many places, not just flame, but from soup shared before bed, from the tea passed around, from the closeness of storytelling, from the hum of a lullaby in a room where everyone leaned a little closer. There were no thermostats, no insulated windows, just knowledge passed down, how to hang woven mats against the wind, how to block the cracks, how to store warmth, like treasure, through the night, because in the ancient world, warmth was an act of love, a quiet art, a shared promise that even when the world turned cold, the home would hold heat the way arms hold a sleeping child. From bundles hung carefully near the fire, leaves and roots that had names not just in language, but in memory. When a child fell ill in ancient days, there was no ambulance, no beeping monitors, only the slowing of breath, the heat on the forehead, and the quiet hush that settled across the home. But sacred, a gift believed to hold the power of preservation and healing, it was stirred into warm water or laid gently onto cloth to cover wounds. Mothers would touch the child's cheek with the back of their hand. Fathers would pause in their work. Elders would look toward the sky as if to ask what nature was trying to say. In small homes of clay and thatch, sickness was familiar, but never ignored. It was not taken lightly, but held gently, like a fragile cup, warm and careful every hour of every day. But to bring balance to the body, the yin and the yang gently corrected with warmth and time. Herbs were gathered not from shelves, but from gardens, from hillsides, but to call peace and drive out bad spirits, or simply to help a child breathe more freely. In ancient Egypt, honey was used to soothe the throat and calm the body, not just sweet. In India, turmeric was mixed into warm milk, not just for flavor, but for its golden strength, believed to fight the unseen troubles inside the body, while ginger helped with breathing and fever, and always the care came slowly with quiet steps. In Greece, willow bark was steeped in hot water to ease pain and fever, and children were laid in warm corners with damp cloths pressed to their foreheads. gentle voices around them reading stories, or simply humming low. Fathers might step outside to find herbs their own mothers had used as children, a blend of earth and hope and ritual carried and folded. Palms back to the home where the fire waited. In China, soups made with scallion, ginger, and dates were given in small sips, not for the stomach alone. Sleep was encouraged, not forced, blankets tucked, just right fresh air let in from carefully cracked windows, incense burned, not to mask smell. And when a fever broke or a cough lessened the room, didn't teach here. It sighed a collective breath like a breeze after a long day. The child held closer, the room quieter, the family thankful, not loudly, but deeply. Children learned early that when they were sick, they would not be alone. They would be held, cleaned, watched, loved in every moment, even when words were few and silence filled the space. Because in the ancient world, healing was not separate from love, and medicine was not separate from care. It was all one thing, the human need to comfort, to protect, to wait patiently for the body to return to peace. In the early light of day, or the golden hush of evening, children played not with battery-powered toys, but with pieces of the world, itself shaped by imagination and joy, and the soft passing of time, and let them dry in the sun. Some played with wooden animals, pulled by strings or used pebbles to draw games in the sand. In ancient Egypt, children tossed clay balls, made from linen wrapped tight, or carved shapes from mud. The Nile was not just a river, it was a playground, shallow water for splashing soft earth, for molding tiny boats floated in the currents, guided by hands that had not yet held scrolls, but already knew the shape of dreams. In ancient Greece, children played knucklebones, made from sheep or goat joints, thrown and caught in ways like dice or jacks, sometimes painted, sometimes carved. They carried them in small pouches, worn on cords around their necks. In the streets of Rome, children made hoops from branches, pushed them with sticks along the roads, or kicked stuffed leather balls back and forth between laughter and the shuffle of sandals on stone. Girls and boys alike played tag or chased one another through narrow alleys, their voices ringing like wind chimes through the city. And when they tired, they sat and made up stories, drawing in the dirt with fingers worn smooth by work, and wonder made of wood, wound with string, or rolled marbles of polished clay in circles, drawn beneath shade trees, laughter rising with every turn and bounce. In China, children flew paper kites with bamboo frames, bright tails fluttering against the sky. They carved whistles from reed and made animals from folded paper, playing indoors when the monsoon rains painted the walls with mist. Indian children played with spinning tops. In colder lands like Scandinavia or the Celtic Isles, play often meant imitation. Children mimicked the chores of their parents, carrying wooden tools, pretending to grind grain, or herd wooden sheep across soft grass, but sewn or whittled by someone close, each one with its own story, each one a small friend who never left. Dolls were carved from wood or shaped from cloth, sometimes painted with ash or berry. Juice never factory made, but by watching, listening, doing, feeling the weight of the world through their hands and eyes and hearts. Play was not seen as something separate from life. It was woven into everything, between chores, between meals, between lessons. It was the breath that filled the spaces of childhood. But even more, children learned from parents how to bake bread, how to tell time by shadow, how to carry water without spilling a drop. And the tools hanging by the door, learning came through living, and every act was a lesson. There were no instructions, no packaging, no rules beyond what the children made up on the spot. A game could last a minute or stretch into days, its pieces tucked in corners, its rules whispered in corners of stone homes. And through play, children learned everything they needed: patience, courage, kindness, strength, the art of storytelling, and the joy of losing track of time, of gods and heroes, not for grades, but to understand the world through sound, through stories. Their learning was in rhythm, in verse, in the weight of words passed down like heirlooms, and food was preserved for long winters. Their education was survival, but not fear-based. It was calm, methodical, shared with love and rituals. Hands taught to move in mudras, feet to follow dance steps that echoed ancient truths even before a child could understand them fully. Because in the ancient world, play was not a distraction. It was a way of being, of understanding, of growing, and it was always welcome like a warm breeze through a quiet morning, and there was always time to improve one's path. Patience was a virtue not just preached, but lived. In the earliest days of memory, before books and paper, before pencils and whiteboards, children learned not by sitting still. Education was not a separate place. It was home. It was the village, the stream, the tree with low branches. The ancient world did not rush into night. It drifted there slowly like a boat floating down a gentle stream, its edges touched by gold. In ancient Mesopotamia, only a few boys attended formal schools run by priests, where they copied signs on clay tablets with reed pens. In Egypt, children of scribes might be taught hieroglyphs, while others were shown how to fish or gather reeds or twist rope. Every skill was memory, every chore a quiet teacher, wrapped in purpose. Greek children recited poetry aloud, listened to their elders speak. But because it felt right, and in the corner, a sibling might whisper a story, one they heard long ago and half remember now. In India, knowledge came through repetition, the chanting of slokas from memory, the learning of songs. In China, children learned from scrolls and from silence, from the placement of objects, the flow of water, the stroke of a brush across rice paper. They watched how tea was poured, how elders sat, how each action carried meaning. In the homes of northern tribes, learning was in the hunt, in the fire, in the fur. Young ones watched as arrows were carved, skins were cleaned. Girls learned to spin, to weave, to soothe a baby's cry, and to read the sky for weather signs. Boys learned to plant, to track, to listen to the wind. Both learned to respect elders, to be quiet when needed, to speak only when something mattered. Things but as journeys, messages, gifts from the gods or from the ancestors, and children were taught to welcome them, to rest with openness. Mistakes were met not with shame but with correction, slow, gentle reminders that life was long. And when stories were told around the fire, children listened not because they had to, but because they wanted to. Each tale a map, each voice a guide. Every evening a classroom without walls. Because in the ancient world, learning was not something you started at 5 and ended at 20. It was something you did always, as long as the fire burned and the stars turned and the earth taught its quiet lessons, one season at a time. As the sun slipped low behind hills or temples or city walls, shadows grew long across clay floors, wooden tables, stone paths. Voices grew softer, footsteps lighter, as if the whole world knew. It was time to begin slowing down, began to stir, not in the house, but within the mind, within the space where stories are born without sound. Fires were tended not for cooking now, but for warmth. Coals stirred, just enough to glow, not to blaze, a soft light that danced across the walls in flickers, like memories half remembered. Children washed their hands and feet, splashing water from basins carried from wells or rivers. Water still warm from the heat of the day, hands moved in habit, guided by parents who did not rush the ritual, and the whole family might wake and sit by the hearth in silence, just listening to what the dreamer had seen. Blankets were laid out, animal skins or woven cloths or layers of straw, all arranged with gentle care. Beds were not high or grand, but simple, quiet, safe, and shared. A mother might hum while folding a cloth. A father might place an extra log on the fire, not because it was needed. There were no glowing clocks, no screens pulling eyes away, only the stars beginning to blink above, and the soft rhythm of breath and voice below. In Egypt, incense might be lit to mark the closing of the day in China. Tea might be poured in silence. In India, prayers might be whispered mantras, spoken like a lullaby, not to be understood, but to be felt. And if a child asked a question, it was answered slowly, with patience, with a smile that said, "There is time for everything, even wonder." Even now, elders spoke of dreams, not as silly. Doors were closed with soft hands, tools put away, not with noise, but with respect, each thing in its place, as if the home itself wanted to rest too. And slowly, so slowly, everyone settled into their blankets, into their places, into the hush that filled the room like water fills a cup. And to sleep was not just to rest, it was to travel somewhere sacred, somewhere only your heart could go. There were no lullabies from devices, only the hum of wind, the breath of fire, the rustle of fabric, and the steady heartbeat of a world that knew how to sleep. Because in the ancient world, the end of the day was not a switch, but a song, a slow retreat, a gentle fold of everything into quiet and safety and dreams. When the last whisper faded from the room and the soft breath of sleep fell over a child or a parent or an elder, something quiet. Dreams in ancient times were not accidents. They were not ignored. They were watched, listened to, remembered, written in sand or painted in caves. They were messages, clues, visions of what was and what might be. In Egypt, dreams were considered gifts from the gods, a sacred form of communication. Temples had rooms just for sleeping spaces, made for dreamers to receive visions, healing, and guidance from the divine. Wrapped in silence, and shadow priests recorded dreams on papyrus scrolls, dreams of golden animals walking through water, of stars falling from the sky, of voices speaking in languages never heard by the waking ear. These dreams were not strange, they were sacred. In Mesopotamia, kings paid close attention to dreams, sometimes asking scribes to interpret them, believing that dreams came from the gods of fate or war or sky. They believed dreams were maps, warnings, or promises. If someone dreamed of rain during drought, it was a sign. If someone dreamed of fire, it might be a prophecy. In Greece and Rome, dreams were studied in temples dedicated to healing. People would sleep in sacred spaces, hoping for a dream that would show the cure for their sickness, the path to take the truth of their spirit. Philosophers wrote about dreams as a way the soul traveled while the body rested, visiting other worlds, learning lessons, returning with truths too deep for daylight. In India, dreams were woven into spiritual beliefs as windows between lifetimes, between the soul and the universe. A dream might reveal a past life or a glimpse of what was yet to come, not something to be dismissed, but cherished like a story told just for you. Children were asked what they dreamed. Elders would nod slowly at their answers, not laughing, not correcting, just hearing, letting the dream live in the morning, like mist that has not yet lifted from the hills in China. Dream interpretation was both an art and a medicine. It was believed that dreams could reveal imbalance in the body, in the soul. And so, the symbols in dreams, rivers, animals, mountains, colors were examined with care, like ingredients in a healing tea. And yet, not all dreams were heavy or divine. Many were simple. A child dreaming of flying, a farmer dreaming of harvest, a mother dreaming of the laughter of a child not yet born. Dreams were seen as a part of life, as real as stone and sky, not less important because they happened in sleep, but more important because they came from somewhere deeper. So when people in ancient times woke, they did not shake off their dreams like dust. They sat with them, walked with them, carried them into the day like gentle songs, still humming in the corners of their mind. Because in the ancient world, the dream was a journey, the night was a passage. The first sounds of morning in ancient times were not sharp, not sudden. They were the soft crackle of cooling coals, the rustle of cloth being folded back, the stretch of limbs under wool or fur or linen as the body remembered itself again. Children awoke, slowly blinking in the low light, drifting in through cracks in walls, or the soft shimmer of dawn on the floor. Birds might be singing far off or close. By fire might still hum faintly from the night before, not yet stirred to life. There were no buzzers, no schedules, only the quiet rhythm of need of the sun, rising of hunger, stirring of duties, waiting with patience, not urgency. A parent might place a hand on a child's shoulder, warm and wordless. Just a reminder that the day had returned outside. The animals stirred, the sky turned pale. The world leaned toward movement once more. Water was fetched, first light falling into clay jars with soft splashes, faces washed with fingers, cupping water still cold from the night children's hair, smoothed by hands still slow with sleep. In Egypt, incense might be lit as the sun rose, a quiet offering to Ra, the god of light. In India, prayers or mantras might be whispered in the doorway, not loudly, not for show, but softly, like breath, returned to the sky. Fires were built again, not for warmth now, but for food, the clink of pot against stone, the hum of flame growing, the soft bubbling of something cooking as the room filled with new smells. And always there was silence, not from absence, but from peace, from the shared understanding that the morning was a sacred threshold, a moment when everything was still possible. Children might step outside, feel the earth beneath their feet, see the world painted fresh by light that had traveled all night just to arrive. Because in the ancient world, waking was not an interruption, it was a return, a quiet joining of body and spirit and earth again. As our story draws to its quiet end, let us return once more to the silence of ancient nights, to the hush of homes, where the fire burns low, and the world has finished speaking for the day. And dreamers alike, and in homes made of stone, of wood, of straw, of clay, sleep settled down like a familiar friend. In every corner of the ancient world, sleep came not with struggle, but with rhythm, with repetition, with calm. The same steps, the same comforts, the same fading of light that told the body it was time to rest. The stars rose again in skies that had no names, yet for constellations. The moon traveled her path, watched by shepherds. Children were tucked into soft places. Voices hummed old songs, the kind without words, or with only one line repeated like a heartbeat, until even the song itself slipped into silence. The wind moved softly through the night, touching rooftops, brushing the tops of trees, whispering to the sleeping world that it had done enough for today. No noise disturbed, no clock ticked, only the earth breathing only dreams, drifting like mist across the floor of the sleeping house, and the light part of the day and the dream, and that even in silence we are held. And if someone awoke in the night, they would hear nothing but the soft breath of those they loved, the distant call of an owl, the steady pulse of a world that knew how to rest. Because in the ancient world, sleep was not the end, it was the return to stillness, the reminder that we are part of the dark. So good night to the ancient world, and good night to you. May your rest be deep, your dreams gentle, and your spirit wrapped in the quiet stories of long ago.